Tonight we're studying Ecclesiastes, lesson number 11. The lesson topic is Do It With Your Might. The lesson goal is to understand the importance of working hard, doing our best with our earthly pursuits. Our lesson text is taken from Ecclesiastes chapter 9, and the key verse of this particular chapter that we're looking at is verse 10, where Solomon said, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest." We as a nation suffered the loss of a great American. Just a few days ago, Mr. Henry Kissinger. He and his family came to America, escaping the German dictatorship that was developing. In 1939, he came. And he came with great wisdom. He came with great ability of leadership. And he served under Nixon and Ford as Secretary of State, Secretary of State. He was 100 years old. He was born in 1923 and died in 2023. Franklin Roosevelt was a wise man in many, many ways. Our nation is what it is today because of his efforts. But one of the things that always amazed me is that he could see things developing that other people just absolutely did not see. He saw a very charismatic, good speaker, a great leader for the German people by the name of Adolf Hitler. And he had red flags all about him in his own mind. And he saw what he was doing to those Jewish liberal thinkers like Mr. Henry Kissinger and family, von Braun. And so he had the government to go over and invite those Jewish German Jews, to come to the United States to live. And it was because of their great expertise and explosives that the bomb was developed, and certainly we have really been very blessed by men like Henry Kissinger, von Braun, and others. What it would have been for me to sit down just to listen to Henry Kissinger. I would have loved to have just been there to see and to hear his wisdom. But there is a greater than Henry Kissinger that we've been studying from the book of Ecclesiastes. We've been studying Solomon. And there just isn't any wiser man in the Old Testament than Solomon. Now, he grew up to be a wise young man, but God gave him greater wisdom than normal. And people would come to listen to him and to ask him questions and to get his advice. I know that I haven't been the proper teacher of the book of Ecclesiastes, but it is a great study, and I hope and trust that you will take these notes and listen carefully to them and see the wisdom of Solomon and teach them to a class or from the pulpit at your local congregation. On page 36, at the top of the page, our lives under the sun are very brief. That's what Solomon was talking about. He wasn't talking about over the sun or beyond the sun. So many things in this book. He talked about life that we're experiencing right now. And so our lives under the sun are very brief. In James chapter 4, verse 14, our lives are described as a vapor that appeareth for a little while and then vanishes away. Grasping the significance of life's brevity, Solomon urges us and the people of his day to live with our might. What an inspiring album to live by. The phrase under the sun is used 6 times in this short chapter. Under the sun, of course, refers to life on earth as opposed to life above the sun, which is certainly heavenly. So when we read the phrase, the dead know nothing, or there is no knowledge in the grave, we understand that the dead know nothing about this life anymore, and there is no more knowledge of this life when we go to our grave. That does not mean that there is no knowledge in the grave, just not any more knowledge of earthly things as they progress. This is consistent with what Christ taught in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. In this passage, Christ taught about the lives of 2 men, one a beggar named Lazarus, and another a rich man who was not named. Both had died and were in the Aegean world awaiting final judgment. The rich man, being in great torment, wanted Abraham to send Lazarus back to his family, to warn them and to urge them to change their lives while they still could. While the rich man could remember earthly things, how he once lived, how his brothers lived, it is apparent that his knowledge was limited to what he remembered. Now remember this, it's limited to what he remembered. He had no knowledge of current happenings, and he no longer could contact or have any influence over earthly events. Hence the importance of living today, every minute, with all of our might. This chapter is packed with wisdom about living under the sun. Following are some 10 key points found in the entry in Solomon's journey called Ecclesiastes, chapter 9. In verse 3, he talks about one thing happens to everyone, and we know that's death. Hebrews 9, verse 27, it's appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. Verse 4, as long as there is life, there is hope. And then in verse 6, once you die, you no longer share anything under the sun. And we need to get that point over. There are people that think that they have a special revelation to their loved one and that they have a special gathering, that they talk to their dead friends. Chapter 9, verse 7, Solomon said, rejoice and eat and drink and be merry. Somehow or another we've got away from that point, thinking that that's the old devil's doctrine. No, that's what we ought to do. We ought to rejoice. We ought to be merry. We ought to be happy. We ought to look forward to family get-togethers and things that will cause us to be happy. And then in verse 9, Solomon said, live joyfully with your wife. We could say, live joyfully with your husband as a wife. Whatever you find to do, verse 10 says, do it with all your might, because tomorrow may be certainly too late. Time and chance happen to all of us, verse 11. Wisdom is better than strength, verse 16. Now somebody says that's, I don't understand that, but Solomon did. And he told us that wisdom is better than strength. The poor man's wisdom was despised, even though he helped save that little city, verse 16. And one sinner can destroy so much good. You know, let the devil come into the church in a Jezebel, and you can have great problems. In fact, so much that the church might split, divide, and even die. A sermon could be delivered on each of these points. There is so much packed into this chapter, so much wisdom. Death is certain, so verse 1 through verse 9 emphasizes the importance of truly living each day, enjoying whatever God has given you. Enjoy the little things as well as enjoy the big things. Enjoy others, and especially enjoy your wife, enjoy your husband, enjoy life. These thoughts build to a resounding conclusion in verse 10. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you're going. This is it, folks. You have one life. Live it with all your might. We all will make mistakes along the way, but may it never be said we fail for lack of effort. Now I want to go to the end of chapter 9, and I want us to look at a parable that's found here in the Old Testament. A parable is a good means of teaching. It was the way that Jesus taught. He taught at least 40 different parables that are revealed. And we say that a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Solomon brings this chapter to a conclusion by giving a parable. Look at verse 14. Look at verse 14 beginning. There was a little city and few men within it, and there came a great king against it and besieged it and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered the same poor man. This said I, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. The words of wise men are heard in quite more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. There is a story that Jesus told in Luke chapter 14. I want you to turn there with me to Luke chapter 14. We're going to look at verse 28 and 29, please. Chapter 14 of the book of Luke. And of course you remember the story about this builder, the cost of being a disciple. He said, beginning at verse 26, if any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. The word hate there does not mean the hate that we think of as malice and we want to do harm. It means to love less. We're to love less those that are very special to us. Put the Lord first. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And which of you intended to build a tower sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he hath sufficient to finish it, lest after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king, sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends an ambassadors and desireth conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, cannot be my disciple. Very much what Solomon was teaching some thousands of years even before Christ told us this beautiful parable. Now, I want to present to you a sermon that I will present here at 6th Avenue shortly. It's on following Jesus from Luke chapter 9, verses 23 through 26. And you have a copy of the PowerPoint. There's a lot of people that say, I don't like PowerPoints, but that's one of the best ways of teaching. I'm old enough to have gone through bed sheets and charts, flannel boards, overhead projectors. I have used all of them. In fact, 86 charts on bed sheets. In fact, so much, I don't know if you remember Yellowfront. Yellowfront store was in Jasper, and I would paint a new chart, and I would go by and buy another sheet and start painting a gospel sermon on the chart. And those ladies got quite concerned. So they asked me, said, do you ever wash your sheets? Why do you buy so many sheets? Well, I had the opportunity then to bring one of them in, and it had the plan of salvation on it. And the story is beautiful. She came to Townley, to the Church of Christ there that night, and she came throughout the meeting that went through Saturday night. And on Sunday morning, she was baptized into Christ. Well, I really think that preachers ought to use PowerPoints, charts, whatever, to get the message over. I have never been the great speaker that V.P. Blight was. I have not had the opportunity of ability to speak like N.B. Hardman, but I can put some things on a board. I can put a chart before them. I can now put PowerPoint before them, and it is a tremendous way of teaching. Luke chapter 9, verse 23 through 26. And he said to them, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. And whoever will save his life will lose it, but whoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it. For what is a man advantaged if he gains the whole world and lose himself, or be a castaway? For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and of my word, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he shall come in his own glory and in his Father's and the holy angels. Over on the next page, the title of the lesson is Following Christ in a World That Doesn't. Following Jesus is our great challenge. And slide number 7, I found that somewhere. I thought it represents Maybe Jesus leading the way and modern man following behind. I hope that you are that person following Jesus close by, following his footsteps, footprints. We sing a song. Sweetly, Lord, have we heard thee calling, come follow me. And we see where thy footprints falleth, lead us to thee. Though they lead over the cold, dark mountains, seeking his sheep, or along Siloam's fountain, helping the weak. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. Footprints of Jesus, how that make the path may glow. This little girl, no doubt, is looking at some sand, or maybe it's the snow, I don't know. And maybe it's her dad that's gone ahead, and she is stepping in his footprints. Brother Brian has a poem that he often quotes in his sermons. It's Footprints in the Sand. One night a man had a dream. He dreamed that he was walking along the beach with the Lord, and across the sky flashed scenes from his life. For each scene, he noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to him and the other to the Lord. When the last sense of his life flashed before him, he looked back at the footprints in the sand. He noticed that many times along the path of his life, there was only one set of footprints. He also noticed that it happened at our very lowest and saddest times in his life. This really bothered him, and he questioned the Lord about it. Lord, you said that once I decided to follow you, you would walk with me all the way. But I've noticed that during the most troublesome times of my life, there's only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, when I need you most, you would leave me. And the Lord replied, my son, my precious child, I love you, and I would never leave you. During your times of trial and suffering, when you see only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. Where does the footprints of Jesus lead? On slide number 13, following Jesus, we're called to be his followers. It's a voluntary service. Jesus has already gone before, and he has gone where he expects us to go. And Jesus will not lead us into sin or danger. We need to imitate Jesus by following his footprints. As faithful followers, we follow Jesus into obedience of subjection. You remember the story? Luke chapter 2, at the age of 12, he was down at the temple talking to the great lawyers of religion, answering their questions, and they were amazed at a young man's knowledge. And the mother and dad went on a day's journey without him, and they came back looking for him. He was in subjection to the Lord, even at the age of 12. That's where the footprints of Jesus will lead us. Then it will lead us into the waters of baptism. You remember Jesus was baptized, not for sin, but to fulfill all righteousness. Those footprints lead, or if we follow him, we'll see that there is the wilderness of temptation. You see, you're doing the biography of Jesus. The footprints of Jesus is into the house of worship, into the mountain of prayer, into the field of good works, healing people, John chapter 9, verse 7, into the homes of the lost, into the places of the outcast, into the classrooms of teaching, in the cleansing of sin. We follow his footprints. We'll go into these stories, into these examples, into the upper room of service, even taking a towel and washing the disciples' feet. The footprints of Jesus carry us into the Garden of Pain, the Garden of Gethsemane, to the cross of suffering. None of us will be crucified, but we will bear much. Peter said, if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God. Following the footprints of Jesus, glory to heaven will be ours. On the next page, 17 slide, we will follow the steps of Jesus. That's tremendous because no one else in this world is worthy to follow, because no greater reward can be given for following anyone. The reward is following Jesus Christ. And so sometimes we sing the song, I have decided to follow Jesus. And the invitation is given. The Spirit and the bride say, come, and let him that heareth say, come, and let him as athirst come, and whosoever will, let him take the water of life freely. The plan of salvation is given. Hear the word, believe it, repent of your sins, confess your faith, be baptized into Christ, live the Christian life faithfully. I think it's a sermon that can be preached much better than I can by you. Live it out in your daily life, following Jesus. Just where do the footprints of Jesus lead us? Does it lead us out here to a golf course? Does it lead us out here to a party? I don't know. We've got to follow Jesus. And where do the footprints of Jesus lead us? It's time for us to have a break.